Silence fell over Lecture Hall 9, so suddenly that Ari Hale felt it before she understood it. One moment the room hummed with layered languages and drifting holograms. The next it seemed the air itself had stiffened. Professor Threl's voice cut off mid-syllable, leaving his final word unfinished and wrong. 47 students froze, instinct sharpened by evolution, whispering that predators announce themselves this way. Ari's fingers tightened around her stylus as she scanned the tiered chamber, noticing the way emergency lights flickered a fraction too late. Ari was used to noticing things too late for comfort and too early for reassurance. As the only human enrolled in this advanced cooperative class, she lived in a constant state of measured awareness. Humans were fragile here. Instructors said it kindly. Classmates said it less so. No natural armor, no claws, no telepathy. She had learned to survive by watching, by listening, by learning the shape of danger before it struck. The walls screamed, not metaphorically. Alloy panels vibrated as if dragged across raw nerves, and gravity lurched hard enough to lift students from their seats. Ari slammed into her desk, breath knocked from her lungs, while several larger beings crashed heavily to the floor. Red sigils blazed alife along the curved walls, translating themselves instinctively into every known language. Intrusion detected. Containment breach. Hostile presence confirmed. Panic surged through the hall. Wings flared, tails lashed, voices rose in overlapping fear. A massive trash student charged the exit, only to rebound from an invisible barrier that sparked violently on impact. Others tried different doors, different strategies, all meeting the same unseen resistance. Ari stayed where she was, heart hammering, eyes wide and searching. They arrived without breaking anything. Tall figures phased through the sealed entrance, their forms resolving into armored shapes that seemed to drink in the light. Matte black plating hid their silhouettes, and angular masks concealed any hint of expression. The markings etched across their armor needed no translation. Veiled Dominion. The name alone carried the weight of erased cities and broken worlds. One step forward, weapon humming with restrained violence. This facility is now under Dominion control, it announced, voice cold and perfectly amplified. Non-essential life forms will kneel. Resistance will be corrected. Several students collapsed immediately, overwhelmed by fear responses their bodies could not suppress. Others dropped to their knees, survival instincts overriding pride. Ari remained crouched behind her desk, trembling but upright. She felt very small in that moment, acutely aware of her soft skin and breakable bones. She also felt angry. The veil began separating the class with efficient cruelty, restraining the strongest first, silencing any protest with precise bursts of force. Ari watched the crystalline being shatter when it tried to fight back, the sound sharp and final. Each second pressed the truth deeper into her chest. No rescue was coming fast enough. No hero would arrive in time. Her gaze dropped to the floor, to a loose panel she had noticed weeks ago during a routine maintenance lecture. It had rattled then, just enough to be remembered. Ari's breath slowed as a thought took shape, fragile and dangerous. She was not strong enough to fight them. She was not fast enough to flee them, but she might be able to think around them. A veiled soldier passed close by, attention fixed on larger prey. Ari pressed herself flat, feeling the cold floor through her uniform, listening to precise rhythm of alien movement. In that rhythm, she sensed hesitation, a carefulness that did not belong to conquerors who believed themselves unstoppable. That, she realized, was the crack. As the soldier moved away, Ari slid her hand toward her pocket, touching the familiar edge of her data pen. It was not a weapon. It was not even supposed to matter. Yet in that moment, with her heart pounding and the room teetering on the edge of slaughter, it felt heavier than any gun. Ari lifted her eyes toward the armed invaders, fear still present but no longer paralyzing. She did not know if her idea would work. She only knew that doing nothing would end the same way for everyone. The silence before action returned, thinner now, stretched tight and ready to snap. Ari did not see herself as brave, only unwilling to surrender the future she had crossed stars to earn. Somewhere beyond the sealed walls, alarms would be spreading, responses calculating. Until then, this moment belonged to her alone. The veil believed domination was inevitable, written into the order of existence. Ari believed something else entirely. History, human history, was a record of impossible survivals. She intended to add one more, beginning here. The lesson would be simple, costly, and unforgettable, taught not through strength, but through perception, patience, and refusal to survive anyway. The first scream cut through the lecture hall as the veil tightened their control. It came from a small avian student whose wings had been pinned by a restraint field, the force crushing delicate bones without visible effort. Ari flinched but did not look away. She forced herself to watch, to remember, because every detail mattered now. Fear was no longer just something happening to her. It was something she had to manage, shape, and use. The veil moved with disciplined precision, corralling the remaining students into rigid lines. They communicated through brief gestures and encrypted bursts of sound, their coordination flawless and terrifying. Ari recognized a tactic from human history. Dominate early, eliminate uncertainty, never allow resistance to organize. It was a strategy as old as conquest itself. Knowing that did not make it less frightening, but it made it understandable, and understanding gave her a sliver of control. She stayed low, crawling behind overturned desks while attention focused on louder targets. Her palms burned against the floor as she dragged herself forward, breath shallow, mind racing. She felt absurdly human in that moment, fragile and breakable, yet stubbornly alive. Every instinct screamed at her to freeze, but humans survived by moving when freezing meant death. A veiled soldier abruptly turned, its weapon angling downward. Ari's heart slammed so hard she thought it might betray her. She pressed herself flat, willing her body to disappear. The soldier paused, scanning, then moved on. In that pause, Ari learned something important. The Veil were cautious. They did not improvise. They relied on dominance and certainty, not adaptation. She reached the fallen instructor's podium and slid behind it, fingers shaking as they brushed the cracked surface controls. The academy systems were layered and secure, but Ari had spent long nights exploring interfaces she was never meant to master, not out of rebellion, but curiosity. Humans asked questions because ignorance had killed too many of them back home. That habit might save lives now. Across the room, a massive reptilian student resisted restraint, muscles straining, eyes blazing with fury. The Veil responded instantly, increasing the field until the creature collapsed, gasping. The message was unmistakable. Strength alone meant nothing here. Ari swallowed hard, feeling both admiration and sorrow. She did not want that fate for anyone else. She activated the podium's auxiliary interface, rerouting minimal power without triggering alarms. Her actions were small, almost invisible, but they changed the rhythm of the room. Lights flickered. Gravity wavered just enough to disrupt balance. A murmur of confusion rippled through the Veil ranks. Ari felt a surge of grim satisfaction tempered by fear. She had their attention now, and attention was dangerous. A voice boomed from the center of the hall, deeper and more resonant than the others. The Veil commander stepped forward, presence heavy with authority. Its gaze swept the room, calculating, searching. Ari ducked lower, heart pounding, knowing that predators eventually noticed patterns breaking. She was becoming a pattern. The commander spoke, promising order, promising survival through obedience. Some students trembled, torn between terror and hope. Ari felt anger flare again, sharp and hot. She understood that promise. Humans had heard it from tyrants throughout their history, always followed by chains. She tightened her grip on the data pin in her pocket, grounding herself. She was not a soldier or a hero. She was a student who refused to watch quietly while others were erased. If she failed, she would fail moving forward, not kneeling. The Veil lines shifted as they prepared to transport their captives. Time was running out. Ari exhaled slowly, steadying her thoughts. Her plan was incomplete, risky, and terrifying, but it was hers, born from observation and necessity. As the commander raised a clawed hand to signal the next phase, Ari made her choice. She would act now, before fear reclaimed her, before hope disappeared entirely. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, waiting for the spark that would either save them or doom them all. She glanced at the faces around her, memorizing them in quick fragments. Terror, defiance, resignation, trust. They were strangers, yet bound by circumstance, by the simple fact of being present when violence arrived. Ari felt the weight of responsibility settle fully onto her shoulders. No one had asked her to lead, but leadership sometimes emerged from refusal rather than authority. She flexed her aching fingers and shifted her stance, preparing to move. The next action would reveal her to the veil completely. There would be no hiding afterward, no retreat into the background. Whatever happened next would define her, not just to them, but to herself. The thought steadied her more than she expected. She squared her shoulders, accepted the fear, and stepped toward destiny with nothing left to lose except her belief in survival. Ari moved before doubt could return. She rose from cover and hurled the data pin across the floor, letting it clatter loudly against metal. Every veil weapon snapped toward the sound in perfect unison. In that instant of redirected attention, she slammed her palm onto the podium controls and triggered the sequence she had been quietly assembling. The floor lurched violently. Gravity twisted sideways, not enough to kill, but enough to disorient. Desks slid, bodies collided, and the disciplined formations fractured. A veiled soldier stepped onto the loose panel Ari had memorized, and the surface folded inward, swallowing him into the wall with a thunderous clang. Shock rippled through the invaders, sharp and unfamiliar. Ari ran. She sprinted low, weaving between obstacles as stun fire scorched the air behind her. Heat grazed her shoulder, pain flaring white-hot. Yet she kept moving, lungs burning, legs screaming. She was not faster than them, but she was harder to predict. Each erratic turn forced the veil to recalculate, and recalculation cost time. She reached the side console and tore open its interface. Her fingers flew, guided by intuition and half-remembered lessons. She rerouted environmental protocols, collapsing safety limits the Academy had never expected to use in peacetime. The air thickened, pressure shifting, sound distorting. Several students cried out as the world tilted again. The Veil commander roared, advancing to the chaos with relentless focus. Its gaze locked onto Ari, cold fury radiating from behind the mask. It raised its weapon, charging it beyond stun capacity. Ari felt a flash of despair. She had bought moments, nothing more. Moments were rarely enough. Then she remembered something else humanity excelled at: stories. She slammed the final command. The lecture hall dissolved. Walls vanished into smoke. The ceiling opened into a burning sky streaked with fire. The ground transformed into churned mud, shaking with distant impacts. Thunder rolled, deep and endless. The Veil staggered as her sensors flooded with unfamiliar data, pain feedback screaming through their systems. This was not a simple illusion. It was a historical simulation, encoded with human conflict at its most chaotic. Ari stood amid the manufactured battlefield, fear still present but mastered. She had grown up hearing stories of wars humanity survived through stubborn endurance and adaptation. Now those stories became weapons. Explosions erupted, deafening and relentless. Phantom shrapnel tore through the air. The Veil fired wildly, formations collapsing under sensory overload. The commander tore off his helmet, revealing eyes blazing with rage and disbelief. This species should not exist, it snarled, voice cracking under strain. Ari stepped forward, dirt and smoke swirling around her. "We say that about ourselves sometimes," she replied hoarsely. "And then we keep going anyway." She moved through the chaos unseen, triggering localized feedback surges, draining Veil power reserves second by second. Their technology was superior, but optimized for controlled domination, not disorder. Humans had learned long ago that disorder was a battlefield all its own. One by one, the Veil fell to their knees, systems overloading, weapons failing. The commander staggered, trying to advance, then collapsed as the simulation compressed inward, sensory input overwhelming even its hardened mind. Silence crashed down as abruptly as it had broken, the illusion evaporating in reality, snapping back into place. Security forces finally breached the hall, weapons raised. Disbelief etched across their faces as they took in the scene. The Veil lay incapacitated, the students shaken but alive. Ari's strength gave out at last. Her legs buckled, and she fell forward, caught by unfamiliar hands. As consciousness dimmed, Ari felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. It was not triumph or pride, but certainty. She had been afraid, unprepared, and painfully human, yet she had acted anyway. The lesson burned brighter than any headline could. Strength was not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. The galaxy would learn that truth soon enough, because the Veil would remember this day, and humanity would no longer be overlooked. Their defeat was temporary, Ari knew, and that knowledge lingered even as medics rushed forward. Empires did not forget humiliation, and predators learned from pain. Somewhere beyond the academy, strategies would be rewritten with her actions in mind. The thought frightened her, yet it also anchored her resolve. If humanity was now visible, then it had to be ready. As Ari slipped into darkness, she hoped others would study what she had done, not to glorify it, but to understand it. Survival was never an accident. It was a decision made again and again by those unwilling to vanish quietly. That belief, fragile yet fierce, carried her onward, promising that consequences awaited awakening, and that the story unfolding in Lecture Hall 9 was only the beginning of something far larger than anyone there could yet imagine fully. Ari woke to quiet light and the steady rhythm of machines that reminded her she was still alive. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, smooth and white, marked with faint diagnostic glyphs. For a moment she could not remember why her body ached so deeply, why exhaustion clung to her like gravity. Then memory returned in fragments of fire, noise, and fear. She tried to sit up and failed. A gentle pressure on her shoulder guided her back down. Professor Threll stood beside the medical bed, his many eyes dim with fatigue, but unmistakably focused on her. "You are safe," he said softly, his translator rendering the words with unusual warmth. "The others are safe as well." Relief washed through Ari, loosening something tight inside her chest. She had not realized how much she feared the answer until it was given. "I didn't plan it," she admitted hoarsely. "Not all of it." Threll inclined his head. "Planning is rarely perfect," he replied. "Adaptation, however, is an art your species seems to practice instinctively." News of the attack spread faster than Ari could process. Footage replayed across secure channels, analyzed frame by military strategists and diplomats alike. The Veiled Dominion had been forced into retreat, their first public failure recorded in stark detail. They had not been defeated by superior firepower, but by confusion, overload, and refusal to yield. That detail unsettled more than it reassured. Ari was discharged days later, her injuries deemed minor by galactic standards. When she returned to Lecture Hall 9, the room felt smaller, heavier with memory. Students paused when she entered, conversations fading into awkward silence. She felt exposed, suddenly visible in a way she had never been before. She took her usual seat in the back, resisting the urge to hide. Slowly, others followed, filling the space with tentative normalcy. A few nodded at her, some with gratitude, some with curiosity, none with mockery. Respect settled into the room, fragile but sincere. Professor Threll resumed his lectures, though his topics shifted subtly. Strategy, perception, and psychological resilience found their way into lessons once focused solely on diplomacy. Human history was referenced more often, not as a curiosity, but as a case study in survival. Ari listened quietly, uneasy with the attention, yet aware that change rarely arrived comfortably. Privately, she struggled. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by echoes of alarms and falling bodies. She questioned every decision she had made, every risk she had taken. The thought that her actions might provoke future violence weighed heavily on her. Saving lives had never felt so complicated. One evening, she stood alone by the academy viewport, watching stars drift past in silent procession. She wondered if the Veil were watching too, rewriting their doctrines, preparing new counters. The galaxy had noticed humanity now, and notice invited scrutiny. Ari understood something then, with quiet clarity. Her actions had not ended a conflict. They had begun a conversation, one humanity could not avoid. Strength had drawn attention, but intention would shape what followed. She did not know what role she would play next, only that retreating into obscurity was no longer an option. Threll joined her, gazing outward. "You carry doubt," he observed. "I carry responsibility," Ari corrected gently. He considered that. "Then you carry what leaders always do, whether they seek it or not." The words unsettled her, yet they did not feel false. Ari inhaled, steadying herself. She had crossed stars to learn, to belong, to prove that humans could stand among the galaxy without fear. That goal had not changed. It had simply grown heavier. Somewhere beyond the academy, the veiled dominion would respond. Somewhere else, others would study what had happened and ask what it meant. Ari did not know the answers, but she knew the principle that had guided her in the lecture hall still held true. Survival was an active choice, renewed constantly, even when victory carried consequences. She turned from the viewport and headed back toward the corridor lights, steps measured and deliberate. The path ahead was uncertain, shaped by forces larger than her, yet influenced by the choices she would continue to make. The galaxy had learned something about humanity, and Ari had learned something about herself. Neither lesson could be undone. Whatever came next would demand the same thing she had given already: attention, adaptation, and the courage to refuse disappearance.